Hello, my name is Michael Mullins, and we are going to be talking about the INTS 4350 Capstone thesis project. My research project was on how technology affects management and the workforce generational gap. The way that I came to this conclusion was working in IT. I see people every day. The older generations that I run into have little to no technological abilities when it comes to computers, and it really, I've seen people come and within 2 or 3 days they have already left the company because they can't do the tasks that they've been asked to do. They can do the physical work, but they can't do the computer work. So I wanted to look more into this particular problem to see what could be done about that. So to give you guys just a brief abstract over what it is. So technology is embedded in our everyday life. Technology has advanced into the workforce, and the generational knowledge of technology is showing. Managers are brought up in different generations you're starting to get a lot of younger technical savvy managers that are having to control younger people and older people who don't have technology. For one example, I'd like to say that there are still a lot of companies out there that haven't embraced technology and are still just using paper and for billing, for purchase orders, for everything. They haven't got into the technological world, and they don't want to because of change. So to move on, basically the 21st digital workforce is upon us, and having the skill sets, knowledge, and technology ability in today's workforce is a challenge. Basically, we talked about the baby boomer generation not being involved at all within technology, but the millennial generation basically is the first generation that's actually brought up, that was actually got technology within their education coming up through school. So it's a big difference. So basically, embracing the challenge in the workforce with technology with each different generation, managers have to adapt to be able to adhere to both groups of personnel. Technology is not going to go away and only going to improve over the decades. So understanding technology with its pros and cons, a great manager can succeed with the generational technology gap. So basically, the problem is each generation participating in the workforce together, understanding how to manage a multi-generational workforce with today's technology requirements for work. Most jobs require extensive technology skills for the basic daily jobs. Managing each generational working side by side requires an understanding of both generations and their technical abilities. For instance, a lot of companies are moving towards automation or looking towards automation to basically cut their P&L statements so that they can gain better profits. One of the big extensions of that, which I'll talk about later, is the cost that is associated with all this. The disciplines that I used for my particular research is going to be from history and the organizational leadership. These are both my areas of study. My other area of study is integrated studies, which is not a usable platform. So those are the two that I chose to do, and I found it pretty well. So let's start with management. So what does management do? So management's responsibility in the workforce is they're responsible for the value, quality, and success of its employees. With each generation working side by side in the workforce, management is involved with ensuring successful employment in the 21st century. That's a basic definition. So some of the aspects that I looked at it from the history standpoint was I looked at it as the history of technology, how technology has evolved over the century from textile mills during the Industrial Revolution to the automation and artificial intelligence in the workforce. Also looked at history of the workforce. By each generation has their own experiences with machines, technology, and how these blend to make up the labor force, which I briefly talked on earlier. I believe the technology didn't start in education until the late 90s and early 2000s. So anybody prior to that going to school didn't really get a lot of technology based learning. Everybody after pretty much is, kids nowadays are that's all they do is play on technology. And I also looked at the history of generations, the generational divide of each generation in the labor market, and how they operate and think about work, family, and the choice of change. Through the organizational leadership, I looked at the generational work skills and ethics. Basically, each generation has their own skill set that by bringing to the labor market, millennials bring technology and baby boomers bring the knowledge and also hard work, which I found out. Communication. Communication is the key to any successful operation, and being able to communicate with each generation to achieve positive outcome through management is the number one key. I'll discuss communication here in a minute. The digital workplace in the 21st century has turned the workforce into a digital computer-based workplace. Knowing technology gap in the generations and managing output for all generations to achieve success. All right, so I want to talk about what basically I ran into the baby boomer generation versus the millennial generation on their work ethic and communication. So when it came down to work ethic, there's a big distinction between the two generations. One was the baby boomers are a structured generation that they like the 9 to 5, they like going to work, they like pretty much the structure of the 9 to 5 job. When you come to the millennials found out that they wanted to be more flexible, they wanted to be able to work from home, they wanted to work odd hours, not just the 9 to 5, because they also enjoy the lifestyle of what they live. They didn't really adhere to the social structure of a corporation workplace. So they don't like being sat down. They don't like being told what to do work-wise, as long as they get their work completed. The other thing that I ran into was the communication between the two. Baby boomers are a lot of eye to eye, person to person, to where millennials are still, they're all over the place with communication. They want everything digital, either email, telephone, everything kind of but face-to-face explanation. So the communication gap, if you're trying to manage, if you're a manager and you have both of these generations, you have to figure out how to communicate between the two of them to basically be effective. Another thing that I ran into was the cost of the digital workforce and jobs. To outfit a company and move them over to the digital workforce, it does cost a lot of money. So with that being said, a lot of the older companies with baby boomer owners that don't like change have tended to stick with the routine of how they do work. They're still using paper. They haven't really digitalized anything from their payroll to anything. It's pretty shocking when you run across these. And basically the cost associated with higher paid workers and training new workers with new technology. So if you bring in any automation, anything, that could be anything from CNC machines for cutting. Those are higher skilled workers that cost more money, plus the capital that is involved with the machinery as well. So after all of this in this project, I really found that it was really interesting between the two generations and how different they were between the two, but being able to manage the two generations is quite simple. It's you have to understand where each generation is coming from, where they have and what knowledge and what they can bring to the table. A lot of places and companies are putting in a lot of diversity training. They're also putting in a mentorships that basically allow older people to work with younger people to get to know them better, understand, you know, that the older generation does need help with technology, but the younger generation also needs help with the knowledge that the older generation has. So by combining the two and by having a mentorship, you know, they can get the two, they can get the two, they can get the information and knowledge, and they can work together to become a better workforce. You know, another thing that I found out as well is as technology grows and enters the workforce, and these people start moving over towards automation, that yes, the technology, it is running some of the older generation people out of work because of the technology, and they basically just don't know it, or they don't want to learn it, because from what I found is the baby boomers are stubborn, and they just don't like change at all. The millennials, they embrace change, but the way that I found out is, are they pushing so much automation in the workforce that they're taking away jobs? Is kind of what I came to the conclusion of. But as a manager, you know, they have to, to work out, you know, how to balance, you know, the automation, the people, and you know, how to blend everything together is basically what I found out. So in basic conclusions, you know, the last statement I'd like to make is basically a great manager can succeed with the generational technology gap as long as they're willing to work with the people, understand the people, and you know, work with the people. I know that was repetitive, but work with the people. Guys, I really enjoyed this semester, and ready to graduate and get done with all these classes. Hope you guys enjoyed this project, and look forward to your feedback. Thank you.